All right, hey ladies and gents, it's Mr. Forgione. I'm back with another AP Gov review video. Today what I want to talk about a little bit is just do a brief content overview before we get into office hours this week. You'll be able to look at these and then ask me specific questions as we get into office hours later on in the week. Or you can email me, whatever, or hit it on Classroom, whatever works for you guys. But what I wanted to show you guys was the three areas of content that are going to be on this AP exam, at least what we've heard from the College Board. These are the three areas of focus for the AP Gov exam. The first one is, now they're going to use the term foundations, okay? Foundations of government. What do they mean? They mean the Constitution. I'm going to get into the specifics there in just a little bit. Secondly, the three branches. Remember how I told you guys that I was going to switch up the order that we covered Gov in because I wanted to spend more time on the three branches, and really I should put up here 3.5 because we talk about the bureaucracy as well. That's sort of the half branch. But the three branches of government, that was really going to be the focus. Well, guess what? That's one of the ones that they're leaving in, and this is where we spent most of our time. So that's a pretty good thing for us as well. We should have lots and lots of notes on the three branches. And remember, this is an open note test, so that should be helpful. And then lastly, civil rights and civil liberties. This is the last stuff that we focused on at the very end of the course. These were the things that we talked about, the 5 freedoms in the First Amendment, and all of the things that were included, not only in the Bill of Rights, but the different amendments and how that pertained to individual rights and liberties. So these are the three areas of focus. Now, what you're going to notice, what is not on there. What is not on there, number one, is political socialization. So we talked about why you believe what you believe, how different religions kind of vote this way, or how the family is the biggest influence in your personal political beliefs. We had a whole unit. We were in the computer lab with Mr. Testa was up there with us at one point. If you're in first period, I don't think he was there sixth. But anyway, that stuff's not on there. We covered it, but not everyone got a chance to cover all the material because of COVID-19. So that's actually been eliminated for the test. The other main area that's of content that's been eliminated for the test is stuff on the media and elections specifically. So when we were talking about horse race journalism and all that, that is not going to be covered on the AP Gov test as well. Honestly, I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. It seemed like out of all the units, that was the one that you guys struggled with the most. So it's not on there. So that's kind of a good thing that we don't have to worry too much about that. What is on there are these three. So that's what I want to talk a little bit about today, is give you a general overview. And then from there, we can talk specifics either in office hours or as you guys are sort of hitting up different questions for me. Okay, first off here, Constitution, and again, what they call foundations. What they want you to get from this, other than just the structure of the Constitution, what they really want you to understand is that after the Revolutionary War, we didn't immediately go in to become a constitutional democracy. We started with this thing for about 6 or 7 years called the Articles of Confederation. Now, the Articles of Confederation were basically among the 13 colonies where we had a confederacy in terms of a system of government, which meant that the states had all of the power. There was no president at that point. There was no centralized power. It was all up to the states. In order for anything to be changed in the Articles of Confederation, it required a unanimous vote of all 13 states in order to change it. And all power, again, was concentrated with the states. Why didn't that work? Well, the main reason is, at least to me, the main reason was the fact that if you're trying to have national defense and you're trying to have a national currency, well, kind of tough to raise money for all of those things if there is no national government. You can't really get by on a military by saying, hey, come join us, come fight for this country, and maybe we'll pay you, maybe we won't. That makes it pretty tough. So that was essentially the reason that we eventually needed to go with a stronger central government, hence where the Constitution comes into play. Now, could they potentially throw in some other things? Could they talk about The concept of natural rights, which is the right to life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. Yeah, they can throw that in. Okay, they can throw in some different things. I don't think they're going to, but they can. Okay, they can throw that stuff in. But basically, what we want to know is Articles of Confederation, how it transitions into the Constitution, what are the main tenets of the Constitution, and then a little bit on foundational documents, which I'm going to link a video to that as well. There's a guy that does a much better job of covering the main documents of arguments for the Federalists and Anti-Federalists. Basically, the Federalists wanted the Constitution, wanted a strong federal government. Anti-Federalists against the Constitution, what like the Confederation model. But there's a guy that does a much better job on that than I do. So we'll look at that. I'll link the video to that. Okay, other things of the Constitution. One of the main compromises here between the Federalists and Anti-Federalists is that it had to include the Bill of Rights. Okay, it had to include that first 10 amendments that give some specific rights to the citizens. That could be something that comes up because that incorporates both of those, doesn't it? The fact that the Constitution had to incorporate a Bill of Rights in order to get the Anti-Federalists on board. Other main things that the Constitution talks about, it gets into the three branches. Article 1 is about the legislative branch, Article 2 about the executive, Article 3 about the judiciary, and then other main components of the Constitution. The fact that we have a supremacy clause, which essentially says that if the federal government, the national government, and the state government come into conflict on something, that the federal government, unless otherwise stipulated, that the federal government should have supremacy, should take supremacy on that or take precedence on that. Another thing that they like throwing in on the Constitution historically is what's called the necessary and proper clause. Sometimes it's also referred to as the elastic clause. Basically, this gives the federal government and specifically Congress the ability to pass laws for anything that may come up that they deem necessary and proper for the running of the country. And the example I always give is, regulating the internet. That there is no possibility that the founders could have conceived of something like the internet. So they made this open-ended so that if something like that came up, okay, the federal government can get involved in something like that. So that's where the necessary and proper clause comes in. Okay, other main things on the Constitution, again, we talked about the three branches on there. The fact it's a flexible document, you can amend it, which is important that it can be changed if need be. So that's really kind of the crux, I think, of where they're going in terms of the Constitution and sort of the foundation there. Secondly, the three branches, okay? It would not shock me in the least if your other FRQ, your non-argumentative FRQ, or for that matter, your argumentative, talks about comparing the three branches in some way. We've talked about the fact that, why did they put the legislative branch first? Why was that in Article 1? And we said, well, a couple of reasons. Number one, you got to make laws before you can do what the executive does, which is to enforce them, or the judicial to interpret them. You got to make laws first. The other thing is we would argue that it might be the most democratic form of government that we have within the three branches, because we have two separate chambers of our national Congress. We have the House of Representatives and we have the Senate. Might not be a bad idea to go back to the very first video I posted and look at the differences between the House and the Senate. Okay, the House is elected by the people, essentially. It's directly elected and it's based upon population. The second chamber, the Senate, is 2 per state. So there's that equality component to that as well. Okay, the executive, by comparison, is not elected directly by the people. They are elected instead by the Electoral College, which serves as like a buffer between the people and the president. And then the judiciary isn't elected at all. The federal judiciary is not elected whatsoever. They are appointed by the president with senatorial consent. So in other words, the president will nominate and then the Senate confirms or rejects the president's nomination. So understanding some of the checks and balances is always going to be an important thing. And again, we can get into that more specifically in office hours if you want to, but to give you a couple of basic ones, okay? Checks that the president has on Congress. The big one would be the veto. That would obviously be a major check that the president has on Congress. Now, one that the Congress has on the president, aside from, let's say, overriding the veto, is that Congress has the power of the purse. The Congress controls the budget, and so they can fund or not fund the president's legislative priorities. The president, by comparison, appoints all of these executive agencies that are responsible to enforce the laws that Congress makes. So the president appoints the Secretary of Education. The president appoints the director of the Environmental Protection Agency and all of these different groups that are responsible to implement policies from Congress. So that's kind of a check that they've got on Congress as well, is that they can have people that they know are going to be either very lax on enforcement or very stringent on enforcement, or ignore certain policies altogether. Where does the judiciary come in? Well, we talked about president nominates, Senate confirms. The judiciary is a little more insulated because they're appointed for life, okay? They're appointed for life, so you can't really get rid of them outside of impeachment, which might be another check, by the way. But for the most part, they're pretty much in once they are in there. But one check is if they pass a ruling, it's still up to the executive to actually enforce it. Famously, Andrew Jackson, leading to the Trail of Tears, the Supreme Court basically said that this federal seizure of Native American land was unlawful, and Jackson famously said, "Oh, the courts made their decision. Now let's see them enforce it." So that's an example where the executive kind of has a check on the judiciary. So the interplay between those groups is important. Obviously, we have judicial review. The courts can find a law unconstitutional. Congress, if they do that, they can alter the Constitution by constitutional convention, or if they have enough members in both houses to pass pass constitutional amendment through state legislatures or what have you. As well, they can go ahead and do that and basically alter the Constitution. So that's something that could come up as the interplay. And then lastly, civil rights and civil liberties. Okay, there's a lot of different ones on there, but if I had to guess, and this is strictly a guess here, the two main areas that I would think that we're going to go with would be something on the First Amendment, the 5 freedoms there, which we've got freedom of speech or expression. We've got freedom of religion, we've got freedom to petition, we've got freedom of assembly or to assemble, and we've got freedom of the press. Those are the 5 freedoms. Or I think something with regard to voting. That's always something that they like, is things that open up voting. So if we look at that, we've got the 15th Amendment gives African Americans the right to vote. We've got the 19th Amendment, which gives women the right to vote. We've got the 26th Amendment, which lowers the voting age from 21 down to 18. So there's some different things there that they like to get into. And then also motor voter laws, where you can actually register to vote at a DMV when you go in to get a driver's license. That's something that they tend to like as well. So a number of different things that could show up there, but those are the two main areas that I would look at. Go back, look at the court cases that we went through, that we did abstracts on. I'll link to another video on that, or I'll post them as well. But these are the 3 areas that I would concentrate on, that I would look at. Hopefully that makes sense. And if you guys have questions, again, we're going to go through them during office hours. Hopefully, we're building some confidence, and we're kind of narrowing down the focus. Talk to you guys soon.